Welcome to When Family Matters Become Legal Matters.
Hello and welcome to When Family Matters Become Legal Matters, where we help you navigate the legal steps needed to protect your family, your future, and your legacy. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and I am joined by Betsy Holton, founder of Holton Law Group, with years of experience guiding families through estate planning, elder law, and special needs planning. Betsy is here to share the practical advice and trusted strategies that turn complicated legal issues into peace of mind. Betsy, welcome. Great to have you here.
Yes. Hi. Great to be here.
So we're going to start. It's our first episode of this podcast. I'm excited to chat with you. We're going to start by talking about why every family needs an estate plan and how, I think there's a lot of maybe some misconceptions out there about what people need, what point of life you're at, finances and whatnot. So let's just start at the very, very beginning. For anyone who's just found our podcast and is completely new to this idea, what is an estate plan? What does it encompass?
Sure. An estate plan is simply a plan that you put together to be prepared for any type of emergency and in case of your death. So a lot of people think that it's just a trust or will, but there's some other documents that can be very beneficial in an estate plan as well. And what you want to have is a plan that works for you and your family when they actually need it. So it's kind of like an insurance policy to make sure that your assets are taken care of in the way that you want them to be done.
One of the things that I kind of mentioned at the top here is that it's often thought of, as, it's just for people with lots of assets, with lots of money, the wealthy people. And that's very much not the case. Can you explain why it's important for every family, regardless of income?
Yes, absolutely. So one of the biggest misconceptions is, as you stated, is that it's only for the wealthy. Well, it turns out that the wealthy people actually need estate plans a lot less than the normal everyday person.
Because they're wealthy.
Yeah, because they're wealthy and they already have everything. And no one really complains about only getting 100 million instead of 110 million, right? So what we find is that some of the benefits of an estate plan help families stay out of court. It helps them stay out of conflict, and it helps the process of transferring assets and providing for care for someone who may become incapacitated and much simpler. It reduces all of the time and some of the costs that are associated with it. So a lot of times those individuals who have very small estates spend more money than they need to taking this through a court process.
Yeah, maybe it's just even in the name. People hear estate and they're like, I don't have an estate. You know what I mean? Like it's like, you think of estate as this sprawling, acreage with horses and stuff, you know what I mean? So maybe that could be part of it.
Sure, because your estate is just, what do you have? What is your stuff, right?
Your stuff.
So your estate is your stuff. So it could be that you have a small amount of stuff, or it could be that you have a sprawling estate, as you indicated. But actually, it's just your things. What do you have? Where do you want them to go? And who do you want to be in charge of them? And that also can include your own personal yourself, your person, because you may, as we stated, become incapacitated. You could have a stroke, you could be in a really bad accident, and you're not able to take care of yourself. And so it gives you an opportunity to think ahead, plan ahead, and find the person that's going to be able to handle those things for you.
You mentioned before that, a lot of people just think it's just wills and trusts, but it's a lot more than that. Can you go over the documents that make up a complete estate plan?
Yes, of course. So the main documents, as we stated, a lot of people think of them as just the will, which I like to call the contract that you make with yourself that you want the judge to enforce, right?
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
What happens is you go to court and you have a will, and the judge authenticates the will. He appoints the person that you put in the will to be in charge of everything, and they distribute everything based on that document. But the trust is a little bit better, because what the trust does is it actually takes all of those matters into consideration, not just your personal items, but your real estate or anything that you have. And the beauty of the trust, and the big difference between the trust and the will, is that the will can only be used if you pass away. The trust can dictate things that may happen while you're still alive, which tends to be very, very beneficial. Some of the other documents that are included in most estate plans are also what we call powers of appointment, powers of attorney, both for your finances and for your medical care. Because if you are incapacitated and you can't make those decisions for yourself, you can't even manage your own finances, you know that it's very difficult to go to a bank and say, I want to take care of mom's affairs. The bank's going to ask you, well, how do I know you really are the person that mom wants to take care of her affairs?
Right.
So a lot of times, if you have not taken the steps to have these documents in place ahead of time, the only way that you're going to be able to deal with these other entities is to go to court and have the court issue a document, an order that says that you are the person responsible. So that power of attorney over your finances, and of course, the power of attorney over your medical affairs, will allow your medical providers to know who it is that they need to be in contact with to help them make the best decisions for your health care.
Let's unpack the wills and trusts a little bit, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So how do you know, or how do you help people decide whether they need a trust or if just a will is enough? And do you need both as a general rule? If you have a trust, do you also need a will?
Sure, sure. So the first thing that we do is we always take an inventory of the assets, and we take an inventory of everything that a person has. And then we go through a scenario of what would happen today based on that inventory with the things that you do have. How would they be distributed? Where would they go? And if you're okay with that plan, you may not need a trust or a will, but more than likely you would at least need a will. Usually, if you don't have any real estate, the will would be a sufficient planning tool because you can do some things for your assets that are what we consider in the legal world pay on death. And so those are documents that already have a beneficiary listed. So they have a way of being passed from you to the person that you've named as the beneficiary. However, as we stated earlier, the will is only valid once you pass away. The will cannot help you or your family if you're only incapacitated. The trust is the document that would be able to encompass all of that, and it will help you and your family not have to navigate the court proceeding. It completely avoids that court proceeding altogether because it's a private document between you and your family and your beneficiaries and your heirs, and it is handled outside of that court process. That's really the beauty of the trust in so many ways. I've found in my practice that the cost of setting up that trust early, kind of a pay now versus pay later, is much less than going through the probate process, when we're not even going to talk about the amount of time that it saves. Now, there are times that we do what's called a pour over will, which is kind of a catch-all will because what we want to do is make sure that your trust is in place to handle everything, but things may change. You may acquire property, you may get married or divorced, or some other type of life circumstance. And before you have an opportunity to update your trust, you pass away. We do that pour over will to catch everything, to say to the court, I know the family really didn't want to have to come to court, but we missed some things and we just want you to roll them over or pour them over into the trust as though they were already there.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. That makes sense. We're gonna go into more detail in the next episode about wills versus trusts, but that's a good foundation for everybody to kind of understand exactly what the two are and how they differ. Now, another thing with estate planning that people seem to miss is, I mean, it's for your beneficiaries more than you a lot of times, right? Because
Right.
people might not want to do it, but you have to think of the children or think of your beneficiaries so they don't have to go through
Yes.
problems there, so there's no issues, correct?
Absolutely. And it's interesting. So we're taping this in May, which is the month that we consider Mother's Month because Mother's Day is here. And we talk about how much mothers love their children. Well, fathers love their children too, but this is the ultimate gift of love to your family because when you pass away and if you have experienced a loss, you know that it's a very difficult time. And one of the things that you don't want to do as a parent is leave your family with not only having to grieve your loss, but having to deal with a lot of your affairs. And sometimes that makes the grieving process even more difficult. I can't tell you how many times we've had to deal with the emotional aspect of the heirs coming into the office. And every time we have to ask questions about, well, what about mom's this or what about mom's that? Right, her bank account. We're going through and we're working through the process, and the people literally break down because now we're having to rehash
Yeah.
those emotional ties that they had to their loved one that's now passed. So I consider it absolutely the ultimate act of love by leaving an organized plan that works for your family so that they can at least just deal with their grief.
Yeah, and in the case where maybe the kids don't always get along, maybe they butt heads a little bit, they might fight over some of that stuff. I mean, you lay it out clearly, not
Mhm.
much to fight over.
Absolutely.
Are there other misconceptions besides that and what we talked about as far as it only being from the wealthy that you find people have as it relates to estate planning?
Yes, a lot of people feel that it's just really complicated. And the truth of the matter is, it's a very simple process once we take the time to go through the inventory of assets and things that a person has. It makes it actually so much more simple because, as I stated before, if your loved one is left to try to find your passwords, they're trying to find out what accounts that you have, they may not actually know all of that intimate details about your own affairs. And so, because you have an opportunity to kind of map it out ahead of time, you put them in a much better situation. So that's the first misconception, is that it's complicated. The second misconception, and I love this one, is that people think that it's too expensive. But the truth of the matter is, planning ahead is so much less expensive than not having a plan at all. Because not having that plan means that you're going to follow whatever plan that the state has put in place for you. And it's going to absolutely put you in front of a judge who's going to make the decisions for you. And so, if we're talking about death, that's going to be probate court, which is typically more expensive than our basic trust plan. And if we're talking about incapacity, we're talking about guardianship or conservator court, which is a completely unnecessary court process with requiring the appointment of guardian ad litems, attorney ad litems, and several people who know nothing about your family, who know nothing about what's important to you, being in charge of making the decision as to who's going to handle your affairs.
Yeah, it doesn't sound optimal by any means, for sure. Yeah. So you kind of touch on it a little bit, but what does happen when someone passes away without any documents in place? I mean, you said that you go with the state's plan for you. What does that depend? Does it depend on the state, on the person, on
It
both?
does depend on the state, but they all kind of follow the same pattern.
Okay.
They first take a look at who would be your legal heirs. So if you're married, more than likely that's going to include your spouse. If you have children and you don't have a spouse, then we look at your children. What if you have neither a spouse nor children? Then we go back up the line and look to see if your parents are available. If your parents are not available, then we go out to your siblings. Well, guess what? That's a very long process, and someone has to be paid to take care of making sure that we've located your heirs. Then, after we locate the heirs, we have to give everyone notice. We file the probate case. The probate court appoints someone to be in charge. That person has to notify all of your creditors. All of your creditors can make claims against your estate. They have to be paid. If the state taxes are involved, they have to be paid. The lawyers are involved. Almost every state requires you to have a lawyer to file probate. The lawyer gets paid, their court costs, and the process runs anywhere from 6, 12, 18 months.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow, that's a long, yeah, that's a long process.
Absolutely. So, and everything's tied up until the judge gives that final.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, you mentioned before something I didn't think of is, it's more like this day and age because of all the digital technology and all that, this passwords and stuff and how to get to bank accounts and all. So all that's included in an estate plan?
Yes, absolutely. We put together in our firm, we put together a document. We call it our little legacy box, and it has those documents that we talked about: the will, the trust, the power of attorneys. But we also have some other information that we put in there so that when someone picks up your legacy box, they have a plan and a roadmap as to how they're going to manage transferring all of your assets.
Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting thing. You wouldn't think about that, like, yeah, if something, God forbid something happens, people might have a hard time. They might not even know where all your assets are or what you
Right.
have if you don't have that. If you're not real close in the scheme of that, everything about what your parents have or
Yeah.
your guardian has.
And we've made a point of becoming a little more secluded. So a lot of
Yeah.
times, we don't have those close friends, maybe one or two, but they may not actually even live in the same city where you are, right?
Mhm.
So and there are things that can happen. A couple can travel and come back home or not come back home, of course, and who's in charge of the children? Well, what we don't want to have is a situation where the grandparents live in another state, and before we have to place them somewhere. We don't want them to go into the system, but if there's no one readily available and there aren't any directions left for whoever's caring for the children, the babysitter or whomever, they may end up in state custody until the person that you want to come in and take care of them if there's no document in place
Mm.
for them. So there's a long process that we go through, yes, to get all of the information, but once we've taken the time to get the information and create the inventory and to assess everything, the plan that you walk away with takes care of just about every scenario.
So for anyone listening right now who's found us and is like, "Oh man, saying a lot of smart things. I got to get on this." What's the first step? What should they have? What should they pull together? How can they get started?
Yes. So myself and most firms will have a pretty intricate intake process. So we start out by giving you the information that you need to gather together so that we can do that inventory and find out, what assets are we going to need to protect from a probate process and what assets can we use to just go through a transfer process. And then, we sit down and we decide how we want that to happen, and then we put that plan in writing for you.
All right. Well, thanks for listening to When Family Matters Become Legal Matters. If today's conversation was helpful, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share the show with someone who might need it. We've got lots of great information coming your way. For more resources or to connect with Betsy and the Holton Law Group team, if you're in Florida, that website is Holton Law Group FL, as in Florida.com. And if you're in Texas, it's DFWTrustandWills.com. Hey, your family's future is too important to leave to chance. The right plan can make all the difference. Betsy, thanks so much. Really great having you.
Thanks, Kevin. Looking forward.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.